Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to Trauma Survivors Walking Each Other Home. And we're here to discuss issues of healing.
That's well said, Denise. That's Denise Rokicki from Ohio. Hello, good friend. And I'm Holly Elissa Bruno from outside of Boston, Massachusetts. And we come to you spontaneously from the heart, from the soul, every Monday. If you're in India, it's probably Monday evening or maybe early Tuesday morning. If you're in London, it's 8 o'clock Monday night. We come to you Mondays, and what we do is spontaneously from the heart, from the mind, from the soul, from our life experience, share what it's like to live our everyday days, as Denise said, healing as trauma survivors. I can't change the past, but I can change how I view the past and how I live with the past today. So, our topic today, because it's the first, goodness, it's the first week in full week. Is that true? Yeah, first full week in 2025 is this New Year's resolutions. It's kind of a tired topic, but let's make it new. I want to ask people who are joining us, and we know you're joining us, which is great. Thank you. If you ever want to sign in, just let us know, and we'll be glad to have you join us. And also, we'll click to see if you're asking questions, and we can incorporate those. Here's the truth: New Year's resolutions. I used to do them all the time. I stopped. Why am I not doing New Year's resolutions? What does that say about being a trauma survivor? What does it say about recovery? So let's ask you that, and then Denise and I. Denise, did you used to do?
I did. I used to do New Year's resolutions, but it's like setting yourself up for failure is the way that I ended up feeling about it. It's, I make new goals every month at the new moon.
That's cool.
So I I find that more helpful.
Do you feel that setting yourself up for failure too? Because that is the similar kind of thing. It's just on the moon schedule, not on the annual schedule.
Right. Uh no, because I believe if I do it with the new moon, I am with the cycles of nature. If I do it at the new year, it is man-made calendar, Julius Caesar's rendition, which it's not accurate with natural cycles.
Okay, well, that makes a difference. And so you don't have to if it's not, it doesn't feel right, but I'm interested. Can you share with us, like, what's one of your, with the moon, resolutions that you make?
Uh, so at the new moon, this time I re-upped my last one about practicing agency.
Right. Now, we've talked a little bit about that, but if people haven't been with us, can you tell us what agency means to you?
To me, agency means owning your power, expressing your power, and also more deeply understanding what I want, what I like, what gives me passion.
Okay, so as I'm listening to this, I want to invite our listeners. What are you hearing when you hear Denise say she's talking about embracing her power, embracing her identity, accepting who she is, and not just being in touch with her power, but using her power? How does that feel to you? And to me, I'm going to comment as a trauma survivor. Why is this particularly an issue? Because trauma survivors are raised to believe. Well, let's ask Denise. How much power?
Unworthy, unworthy of power, and
Unworthy.
required by force, power, cultural norms, whatever it was that we believed that we had to succumb to the abuse that we experienced.
Because if we didn't succumb, what was the option?
Well, we wouldn't have a family or food or a home or any of those things.
Yeah, which would mean death.
Right.
right? Because back in the day, was there any shelter you could go to? Was there any? No, me either. If you had, like, what I kept fantasizing doing was just saving enough money from babysitting or whatever, because I started babysitting really young because we were so mature, right? I would just go to the little village, the little town that I lived in. It was just 18,000 people. I would go to where I knew the bus took off, and I would just get on a bus going south. Now, why south? Because it would be warmer.
Right.
And yeah, and I would just go as far as I could. And then I just had this naive or optimistic belief that I would find something or somebody where I could work. And I had a hard work ethic because I had been given a lot of responsibility early on, as you did, as most trauma survivors do. I could work and or I could find a place to live, and I could just basically find my own way. That was my fantasy. The other fantasy I had was about it came from a story that I read in one of my mother's women's magazines, and those women's magazines in the 50s were pretty much about what? Do you remember reading those or seeing those? Your mother's mags?
I don't, but I'm guessing housekeeping, cooking, fashion.
Makeup, how to look good when hubby came home
Right.
and all kinds of recipes. And there was some
Stay
stuff about
skinny.
stay skinny, look good, make your own clothes. And it was never about, it wasn't really about improving yourself, unless improving yourself meant skills of cleaning and cooking and that kind of thing.
Right. Becoming a better wife.
That's right. That was the choice because that was the only choice. But there also were in some of my mother's magazines, Ladies' Home Journal was one of them. There were short stories. And there was a Christmas story that I read, and I was so young that I believed it. The Christmas story said that there was a child clearly unwanted, and the child on Christmas Day just left the house and nobody noticed. Does that sound familiar?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, nobody notices unless we're supposed to be taking care of something or somebody, and it's not done. So the child just left the house and walked out in the snow and kept walking until she found a house with a light on that seemed welcoming. And she knocked on the door and she said, "Would you take me in?" And this couple, as life would have it, had been waiting for a child forever and hadn't been able to have a child. So they said, "Of course, come in." And then you can imagine what happened after that. Happy, 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 happy,
Joy.
joy to the world and no baggage. Child was just so happy to have somebody who cared, and the adults were so happy to have someone to care for that it was just bliss. Child started going to school, child started, enjoying eating. And there was none of the Charles Dickens, like, oh my God, it was the best of times, but it was the worst of times. So I chose to believe that. I honestly believe, and this probably relates somehow, Denise and friends listening, to New Year's resolutions. I honestly believe that was a possibility. As a little kid, I believed if I can just find the right couple, it had to be a couple. It had to be a couple because that was the only stable possibility in the 50s.
Yeah, as we understood it at that time.
Right. There weren't
Well, I
these
was born
wonderful.
in 58, but
So early 60s, true also, right?
right.
It's just I had to find a couple. I mean, I've spoken before, and I think I wrote in my book about the Gergens, these two gym teachers. They were married, and they would come around. It was back in the old days. They would come around to the elementary schools, and they would do physical activities with us, games with us. And if we couldn't go outside, we'd stay in the classroom and do things in the classroom. And they were so much fun. They were fun. Can you imagine adults that were fun? And they
Right.
didn't demand anything. It was all by invitation. Two forces, you talked about forces, Denise, two forces that are healing, invitation, not demanding, and playful fun. Those things I wanted so much. And so I said to them, can I go home with you? And I meant it 800%. 800%. I was ready to go right then, ready to go. And of course, they looked at each other and said what they probably said many times before about, thank you so much. That's very sweet of you. But, we have a home to go to. And, the minute they started talking about that, I just said that I know that's it. That's it. Not going to happen. But I did have that dream that there was someplace, a home and a family for me. And I wonder, do you think there might be, help me out here, sweetie, do you think there might be a connection between that kind of fantasy dream as a child and believing in New Year's resolutions?
Yeah, I
Help
think
me understand. What do you
it's
think,
a
sweetie?
it's a fantasy wish, not really based in reality. Like how many people sign up for gym memberships in January and don't fulfill it. Go a month, go maybe 2 months, or
Yeah. And you know
it's a
what, sweetie?
fantasy. It's a vision of who we wish we were.
Yes. And it's, you know what? That gets right down to it. And my friends, besides Denise and me, if you were to have a New Year's resolution, what would it be? And here's my question as you are formulating that, or maybe you already have. The next question is it about changing yourself? Or is it about becoming more of yourself? Now, this year, I've decided to be as true to myself as I humanly can. That's not perfectionist. That's just as humanly possible. I want to be as true to myself as humanly possible. And what does that mean? Well, it means today, for example, I'm still not well. I was in India. I got two illnesses, one on the way back from India and one when I got home. And they both really took a toll on my immune system. So I'm at about 50 to 75% of energy. So what does that mean? That means it took me I think about 40 minutes in the shower. I'm saying to Denise, I'm not feeling great, but I'm going to go shower. And Denise says, great, that'll help. Well,
Shower
it
will
did.
help.
It did. And I stayed in and I got every inch of my skin. I got my hair nice and clean. You know what? And when I got out, it was 3 minutes after 4, or 3 minutes after 3. And I said, oh, Denise has been waiting since quarter of, silly me. But, and I apologize to you, Denise. There it is, though. There it is. I'm still learning at now age 79 how to be true to myself and at the same time responsible to others.
Right, but you needed that time in the shower. And I am not really, Monday is my day when I just calm at home. Que sera, sera. I do go out. Like I have a new tutoring client this morning even. But
Good.
I'm just really calm on Mondays. It's a home day. And so I roll with it. And we had problems signing in.
Yeah, we've
So
had that problem for a while now, but yeah, I appreciate your flexibility, and I find actually with trauma survivors that we do that for each other.
right.
Um, yeah, we just do that for each other because I don't know what's going on with you unless I ask you. You don't know what's going on with me, but we are both trauma survivors, which means another thing. It means we constantly had to meet other people's expectations.
Right.
What do you think that principle of having to meet other people's expectations, how do you think that might have figured into New Year's resolutions for you?
Right. It's typically humans that I know, choose affirmations or resolutions that are like everybody has the same one: lose weight, exercise more. They're like expectations of our in our culture. It's not
Mhm.
be the best me that I can be. It's not find my genuine self or express my genuine self. It's lose weight, exercise more. Well, they're just so standard.
And
And we're
those are
not
things,
standard.
right? Ain't nobody's standard. I mean, I don't
No.
think anybody's standard, even people that are not trauma survivors.
Right. Same thing like normal. There is no such thing as normal.
Right. And so all of this theory that American education is based on, it's so wacko because it's always about helping each child find her promise and find her own way of learning so she can learn math if that's foreign to her, or so she can learn reading if that's foreign to her. But no, that's not the militaristic way in which we were raised. So I think maybe that whole lockstep thing came over to New Year's resolutions. And I
Right.
think resolutions, I think you nailed it. I think it's about how can I improve because I'm not enough. What
Right.
if instead I said, this is who I am? And instead of trying to be who I'm not and measuring myself by an external standard of losing weight, which I several times I've wanted to do that, or an external standard of, oh, I used to do things like prayer and meditation. I've got to do that every day. And I admire people that do that, but that's not the way I do it. I came to see that my prayer and meditation is in the moment. I talk with my soul, I talk with what's divine in the moment. And it's that direct contact that's me. I value people that meditate, and I value people that have a practice because that helps them. I know it just isn't me, and I could
Right.
label myself as lazy, undisciplined, but I don't think so.
Those
But
are
you
negative bents.
exactly.
And we don't need the negative bents. It's not helpful.
So when you say bent, that's interesting. Did you say bent?
Yeah.
What do you mean, sweetie? I hear you,
It's
but I want to know.
it's it's skewed towards unworthiness, negativity, judgment.
Yeah, that's it. Judgment. We were raised with endless judgment, and the judgment was rarely positive and only positive if I did what I was supposed to do. And then it wasn't even thank you for cleaning the house. Thank you for cleaning the bathrooms, the least popular job at all. Thank you for getting your homework done. It was that's your job. Have you run into people in your life who say, well, I don't ever say thank you because you're just doing your job?
Not really. Not that I can think of, but I mean, in the teaching profession, though, we're oftentimes, especially early childhood, looked at as less than, but I never accepted that.
Mm, that's good for you, girl. It's hard though, because you were talking in the beginning about essentially about the systems that require things of us. And being in the early childhood system, folk that are there either accept that we're at the bottom of the status hierarchy, or or we can say, well, maybe school age people are at the real bottom, or we can say, I don't accept that definition.
No, I find this very extremely important and I want to participate. I am passionate about early childhood.
And why, Denise?
It's my inkling, my agency, it's what I dig.
And it's what you do well.
If I was one of the lucky ones in my generation to have a job that I loved. Like Oprah Winfrey would always say, do what you love and you won't just do what you love. And so I did.
Yeah. And what did that bring to you internally?
Great healing. I really felt like I was making a huge community contribution, and I was really, giving these children safe days, safe, exciting learning days. It was good.
What did you believe there was a long-term impact of giving those day after day after day? Safety,
Interestingly,
love,
yeah,
acceptance.
I've been kind of facing it, that, the most kids don't remember their preschool teachers, that even because I was often a lot of kids know me as Teacher Denise, the storytime teacher.
Mhm.
And so they don't really remember me in their future. It's interesting because I stay connected with a lot of parents. So now, my kids are off to college, and the kids that I stayed in contact with, they remember me. But the kids that I only did story time with them for when they were 2 and 3 and 4 years old, they don't remember it.
Mm.
It's interesting.
So how do you feel about that? That's kind of harsh.
I'm okay with it. It's a little bit slightly disappointing, but I
Mhm.
know that what they are today was built on how they were approached at 3, 4, and 5.
See, I look at this differently. I believe that anyone who loves a child at any age makes an indelible, positive impression on that child.
Yes.
And the brain research that talks about two types of memory. One is, I don't have to think of the term, but it's extrinsic memory. That's when I would take it in from the outside. The other is intrinsic memory. The theory is that in intrinsic memory, which is if someone touches my soul, my being, my heart, I'll never forget the effect of that person. It might be I forget the name of the person, it might be I forget the things that we did, but I don't forget that person. That person went into my heart and my soul. Look, I'm soothing my chest because that's how it feels.
Right.
That is how it feels. And I believe, and here's what the research on intrinsic, extrinsic memory says. It says babies come to the earth, and here's the word, with robust intrinsic memory. So we get it from birth, and maybe even before birth, who loves us and sees us, and we get it who doesn't love us and see us. And that aligns, Denise, with the basic function that trauma survivors ask all the time: safe or unsafe?
Right.
Am I safe or unsafe? And Denise Rukiki, when I think of all the years when you helped 3 and 4 and almost 5-year-old kids walk into the classroom and say, I am me, I am here, I am safe,
Yep.
that had to go inside of them.
It
I believe
does.
it does.
Yeah. And when when they're still in connection with me,
Yes.
like this one guy comes to story time. His sister came before him like eight
Mm-hmm.
years ago, and he didn't come for like a month and a half, 2 months, and he's also autistic. But when
Okay.
he came through the door, he was late Friday. They were late Friday. But when he came through the door, immediately I could feel him, he could feel me, and we made eye contact, and like we were both so happy. So that affects the physiology of the child. You know, somebody outside my family loves me and is happy to see me and is greeting me with a look.
And how old is this child?
Uh, 4.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe that when children have healing experiences, those experiences go inside of us, just as trauma experiences go inside of us.
Right,
So, how many times have you and I don't want to put it that way, but it's so important that over and over again, you and I and other trauma survivors talk about how healing it was for us to be out of doors.
right,
One of the first things 4 years ago, I remember you saying was that you get on your bike and you could ride free. It was safe to ride your bike and you could feel the wind in your hair, ruffling up your hair. And there were other people from other countries saying the same thing.
right,
And I remember organizing bike hikes. Nobody cared. No, from my family, they didn't care. They didn't ever ask. I just said I'm organizing a bike hike. And so all of my friends would meet at a certain grocery store. And back in the day, there were corner grocery stores where there was corner candy and they, just it had everything. But there's like one room. That's what it was. We'd meet there, we'd have packed our lunches and we'd take off. And we'd go places we hadn't been. And we didn't have those wonderful bikes with gears. I just had a regular old pump it up, pump it up, pump it up bike.
right,
I got in great shape. And I felt so safe exploring unknown territories because I was safe in the out of doors.
right.
And that was inside of me. That's inside you.
Yes.
I believe also that's inside of any child who is given the opportunity to be out of doors. Did you notice that when you took your kids outside?
Oh, yeah. The poor behavior children became the leaders when we went outside.
How did they do that? That happens over and over again. How did you see that happen? What was going
uh,
on within them?
because they're free. And, that behavior comes from being restricted or limited.
Mm-hmm.
And once those limits were gone, ooh, yeah.
So
I
give
got
us an example. What's an example of somebody who is, not a problem, but presented as a problem in the classroom with behavior and then got outside and whoopee, skippy, yippee.
right. I have one child in mind specifically. His mom was even a student teacher in my classroom. And I had his brother and him. And he couldn't be, he is an athlete and he has to be moving and using his muscles.
Yep.
And the classroom was not, like it was hard for him to stand in line. The demands that we make, stand in line. Funny.
Sit still.
Right. Don't use your power. In the classroom you're limited to walking, not throwing,
Use your inside voice.
right. There's a lot of limits and he could not function on that. But boy, when we got outside, he could throw a football, he could throw a frisbee, he could run, and he became a leader. In other words, the other kids wanted to be able to play like he could. He was tactily very intelligent.
And Howard Gardner put a name on that.
I don't know it.
Okay, I learned it because it applied especially to me. Howard Gardner said we had multiple intelligences. Some kids have
Multiple. Yeah,
social.
I know that.
Yeah, and so yeah, no, I know you know that, sweetie. And but one of them that's kind of gets a kid in trouble is called kinesthetic learning.
Right,
And that's like the boy you're talking about. He learns by being in his body and doing things with his body.
right. He's
And then
very intelligent also as far as academically, straight A student, but he has to be able to move. Like nowadays, teachers are a little less rigid in how you stay at your desk, or especially if, your parent's a teacher and they talk, you go talk to the teacher that, this kid needs to move. Most teachers, I think, are pretty receptive to that. I hope I have a
Yeah,
vision that they are.
we want them to be. And we
Yeah,
also, what you said also, I'm going to take a step backward with it because I also want parents to know their children well enough to say,
right.
Denise is really happy when she's out on her bike. That smile she gets on her face. I don't think my parents ever noticed. I don't think
Right.
they could notice. A narcissist can't see beyond herself. And with mental illness, which my mother had trying to survive, she had moments, but she really couldn't see much beyond herself.
And when I was on my bike, the only thing they could see was the back of my head.
Hasta la vista, baby. Yeah. So what's interesting, I've never said this before, and I want to hear what you think about it, but I'm thinking that for me as a kinesthetic learner, to be moving, to be outside, to be free, that's where I became my true self. And I did as much of that as I could. Now, nobody said that to me, and I didn't have the ways and means to identify that. I just
Right.
knew go.
You didn't have an IEP.
Right. I didn't have anybody paying attention. As long as I got good enough grades, nobody gave a sweet 50 in school. And I didn't have a choice about that. There was punishment, and I didn't want that punishment. Um, so I had to do well, and I figured out how to do it, and I did it. And however, I also was outside and doing and being as much as I could. And I sadly, I got this message that I had to earn outdoor time, had to get my chores done before I could go out of doors. But I did those chores, not because I wanted to do the chores, but because that was my passageway to freedom.
In
But here's what
school,
I'm thinking.
in
Yeah, sweetie.
school, we had, in our day, we had two recesses in Catholic.
Fantastic. How did
Yeah.
that work?
We had one morning recess, and then at lunchtime, after lunch, we had another recess. And we had gym and we had music. I mean, uh, school was a lot. I mean, there were active times. We weren't required. We did have to sit in church every day also for service, but you know, we got outdoors too. I think it
That's
was,
really good.
yeah, I
Uh-huh.
think there was less stress on the academics and the outcomes and the standardized testing back then. We also didn't have special ed.
Right. Everybody was in the same class, or they put people off by
i-
themselves.
Institution, right?
Mhm. Yep. Yeah. I had a good friend, Carolyn, who was sight impaired, and she never went to public school. She got sent to an institution. She and I were friends when she would come home. Here's what I hadn't said before that I want to see how you feel about this. I
Right.
feel like even though I was a kinesthetic learner and I needed to be active in my body um, to learn, I feel like I learned from birth to dissociate. So that even if I had to sit still in the classroom, or even if I had to hold still at church for quite a while, I could just fantasize my way into
Right.
another world.
Yes. And I think because I've received new information in my family, that my mom reported to me that my father would come home inebriated and hit her and yell at her and, be mean to her. So probably I witnessed that.
You
And
did.
so that is where an individual could cope by dissociating.
Mhm. I'm sorry that happened, but I'm glad your mother told you the truth. And when I was with my sister Lynn one time, she said to me, "Don't you remember at the dinner table?" And that's what it was called, at the dinner table. "Don't you remember father hitting mother?" I didn't, because I think it was too unbearable.
Right.
It was just too unbearable to remember that. And she said, "Oh, yeah, you were there." But I think my capacity to save myself from the pain was to dissociate. I just read something powerful that said, we can't swallow or bury our feelings without burying something alive. How does that sound to you?
Yeah. Um, it it's taken me a lifetime to reassociate my feelings.
Yeah,
Really.
really. I mean, you and I talked about the processes we both went through. You had your thesaurus
Right. Activity. And
where
it's
kept
really,
learning about feeling.
and it's still helpful because I'm listening to a podcast, following a podcast now about, pursue your passion. And I'm like,
Mm,
well, what is my, like I have to figure out what my passion is. It wasn't readily at my fingertips. And so still I am, and so then I had to understand that, oh, maybe my passion is more tempered than passion, because that's what I learned in my feelings uh thesaurus project, was that the range is huge. So inklings are passion,
yes. And
you
for
know?
trauma survivors, the range gets smaller and smaller and smaller.
Right,
I don't think it ever goes away, but it hides. It gets buried.
right.
I,
And we have
I
to always have the coping of uh, open up. Right. And yep, it's like that.
it is, and it has a lot to do with safety and safety inside. And I've come to realize that because I internalized my mother's it's insanity. And like I felt with her, I felt for her. She was my child. I was taking care of her. When she would disappear into these horrible, not just dissociation, she would disintegrate. When her being would disintegrate, I felt that. And after a while, I felt like, well, this is my legacy. It's going to happen
Right.
to me too. Every time I fly halfway around the world and I no longer need to take medication, every time I fly halfway around the world, I get on a plane, I don't know anybody. Every time I land in a foreign country, where people are not speaking English, the money is different, the topography is different, everything's different. I am saying I can do this.
Right.
That myself, who I am now, is strong enough that I take myself anywhere. So that's why, and we probably need to wrap within about 10 minutes. But that's why I am attracted to this possibility of a New Year's resolution. Now, I like your moon resolution with each moon, but I like that. I might adapt that. Thank you. That the resolution being not to change myself, but to become myself.
Right. Allow. Because
Allow.
we already are alive. We exist. We're worthy because of that. Because we exist, we are worthy. And that's really hard to actualize or express,
Accept. For me, it's really hard
accept or
to
believe.
accept.
Right. And it's what we believe is what we get. So, we got a lot of wrong beliefs in our
I tell
abuse.
you, one of the basic defeatist, and really toxic on living principles I got was the punitive nature of life.
Right.
That's what I learned, that good, bad, black, white, um, perfect, imperfect, wanted, unwanted, judged, unjudged. That was so handed down to me by generations of Calvinists and generations of Catholics and generations of people of male, female stuff
And
that I didn't
culturally too.
culturally, man. Yeah,
It's
you,
culturally supported that black, white, right, wrong.
I know what you've been thinking. I know when you're awake, I know when you've been bad or good. So be good. Or you're only getting coal in your stocking, you
Right.
know?
But if you get a
And
few friends with charcoal, you can make a grill, make a fire.
honey, that's right. That's right. If you get a few friends like I am that are badass, all of a sudden we can do badass things together. And after a while, we can create a badass community. And
Right.
after a while, by just being ourselves, curiously, but perhaps not so curiously, other people want to be with us.
Right.
That's the theory. That's the feeling. That's the passion behind our doing this every week. If we just tell the truth, people will want to join us.
Right.
And
They
I,
want the truth too. I mean, you know,
right,
we we uh we want a better world for children. For me, my focus was I want a better world for the children. But now that I'm an old woman, I want a better world for the old women too. And I want a better world for everyone in our community, not just a certain group.
I had an experience with that shortly after the election. And friends, Denise and I are both in the United States. And the United States is going through a major sea change. I don't even know what sea change means, but it's major.
Right.
And shortly after that, I had this soulful way of doing things, which is I wanted to talk with people about how they voted and how they felt. And I was open to hearing people that voted for the person that I didn't vote for. And as I did that, I found this process inside of myself that I've always valued. And yet it was only half true for me. Now, here's what I mean the process inside of me is I can be curious, not judgmental.
Right.
Because children come to the earth curious, naturally curious. We want to know, and judging gets in the way. If I decide, well, you're a bad person, I'm not going to get to know you. But if I decide, you know what, if I keep looking to see what your strengths are, maybe I can connect with you on those strengths. So that's what I did. I'll just briefly remember something I talked about, which was a conversation with a person who came to my house to do some routine repairs to the HVAC system. And he did not vote for he was happy about the election. I was saddened and hurt about the election. And so I said to him, no, I really want to know. I'd like to know. And he went through all kinds of stuff. I mean, he said, no, I can't talk about that because you'll get upset. I said, wait, I'm in charge of whether I get upset. And I'm really curious. I want to know what it is that you feel really happy about and grateful for. And I was able to listen to him. Now, what happened was he, as we say now in education, he dysregulated. He himself went into like a real thing. And I said, it's okay. You're expressing pretty strong feelings about why you're happy. And I'm listening. I'm listening and I'm not judging. And I did that with a number of people until I remembered something that I've always known, which is I can be with people and accept them without judging them. And when I do that, not only are they free with me, but I'm free with me.
Right.
And the part that I didn't have for a long time was I feared that if I were so open, as a friend of mine who did really well in law school said, she said, my mother always said to me, if you have too open a mind, your brains will fall out.
That's
I said,
funny.
oh my God, but she believed it. She believed as 55% of Americans believe it's better to have clear standards, clear judgments, yes, no, right, wrong, incorrect, correct, But what I discovered when I was with these folk who were very different from me was that I was just fine. I didn't lose myself. I didn't lose what I believed in and what I cared about. I still cared about those things, but I also knew it was not my job, nor my ability, nor my desire to change somebody else.
Right.
Now, the fact that maybe here's a hopeful thing. I have this hope that when I'm with people like that, and they know I'm really different from them, but they know they still are accepted fully by me. Maybe that says something. If we go back to the basic thing about intrinsic, extrinsic memory, at any age, I think we need to feel safe with people. And when we feel safe and not judged, we're home free.
Yep.
Who do we want to sit with us when we're dying? Because I know more and more people that are dying, and who do they want to be with them?
I
Have you
don't
thought
know.
that?
I don't
Yeah.
know who I want to be with me, but I'd rather go privately.
Okay. Okay. I've thought about this, and I've chosen to do my will and all of that. And there are layers of people that I want with me. I basically want other trauma survivors with me who know, a life of trauma and a life of recovery. And I would love to have them just sitting with me. And we meet all the time. And when we meet, we don't judge each other. We just talk about what we're feeling, what we're experiencing, what we're choosing to do, what we're learning. And we talk about how simple things like the serenity prayer can help us get through stuff. So I might say, yeah, I just lost a dear friend and it really hurts. And yet she and I, over and over again for 30 something years, would call on the serenity prayer. Grant me the serenity to accept the people I cannot change. Well, that's everybody else. Courage to change the one I can. And the only person I can change is, and the wisdom to know the difference. And that one principle, Denise, has gotten me through so much. So much. When it took me decades to accept that my narcissistic father could never love. It wasn't just me he couldn't love. He couldn't love himself and he couldn't love anybody else. When I finally got that as he was dying, I was angry as hell. And that was healing. Angry as hell that I had, back to this basic thing we're talking about, mythology, fantasy. I had this fantasy that if I could just be accepting enough of my father, one day he would be himself with me.
Right.
But there was no self there beyond his rage.
Right.
And that's hard, even for an adult child to accept.
Yes, it is.
And for you, when your mom told you recently, you got this recent knowledge, your dad would come home, your biological father would come home unsafe, outside of himself because he was drunk,
Drunken
and he
stupor.
drunken stupor. And we lose ourselves. I mean, psychologists say we split off from ourselves.
Yeah,
And
I call it beer 30. When my sister gets to a certain point
ah,
of
right.
number of beers, I call it beer 30. It's like a switch, clicks off, and it's a different human.
It is a different human. When my mother went into her insanity, psychologists would say she split off from herself. And when my father would get drunk, or other people I know would get drunk, or even I would inebriate with something, I wouldn't be myself. I would be this
Right.
fantasy of myself.
Right.
I have friends that had, what did they call it? Secret best friends. What was that thing that children have? They have best friends that are ghost best friends, play,
I,
they,
I just saw a clip on that today. My secret friend, my imaginary friend.
Imaginary friends. Did you have one of those?
I didn't.
I didn't either. But I know people who are trauma survivors who had imaginary best friends. And what's interesting, I discovered, is that their sense of the deity was that the deity just took over who the imaginary friend was. So, yeah, this is what I've listened to very closely. This person, not alone, would talk with the divine, whom she had a specific name for the divine. She would talk with him as if he were her BFF, totally accepted her. She could tell him anything. She felt totally loved by him. And she carried that into adulthood. Now, beneath that, she had a lot of fear. And I said, look, I wanted to have something like that when I was a child and I tried. But when I would say, help me not have to face this horrible torture that my father's doing, or help me not have to be with my mother when help my mother stop going insane. And no help came. I
Right.
decided, as most trauma survivors do, I was alone. Wasn't anybody going to be able to help? I had to do it alone. And that's a challenge. We just talked about who do we want with us when we're transitioning. And I heard what you said, and I trust that and I believe that, and I also trust and believe what I said about there are people who have been with me throughout this journey that I know accept me, not just warts and all, but beauty and all. They accept the whole me. And that's what I would like to have with me, people that they don't have the answer.
Familiar you.
Yeah. And
You
that's
that they're
that.
familiar with, right?
You got it. And the familiar me is, and that's what I'm just going to end my part of this program with is what if my moon, and I'm going to do the moon thing. I think that's a great idea. Please remind me when the next new moon is coming. When the new moon comes and when the old moon says goodbye, what I'm going to do is ask to be free enough and loving enough to just be present enough, to just be as able as is humanly possible to be my true self in almost every situation. And Denise, when I look back on my last 10 years, that's what I've been doing. And there's so much detritus and so much stuff, that each time I recognize something like this principle of the punitive, earn your way to heaven,
Right.
You're good or you're bad, you're going to be punished. And even if you're good, in my family's religion, the Calvinist part, I think it was part of the Catholic tradition too. You were either saved or you weren't.
Right.
You mess
It,
up.
plus, don't get a big head if you're good.
No, no, don't get a big head. That was huge. Big head would mean don't trust yourself.
Right.
You're trusting yourself. What's wrong with you? So we've begun on this whole thing about not having New Year's resolutions. You've introduced a whole new possibility. And tell us, as we're closing, tell us a little bit more about how that's worked for you. Your moon,
Uh,
what do you
it's
call
been
it?
amazing. I typically do like some kind of affirmations for my three wishes, I guess, because I
Okay.
take three, the daughter, the mother, the crone. And uh, one thing that is start most radically changed was I didn't think I had enough. I never thought I had enough. I would keep the same $20 in my pocket always. So then I did this affirmation, all my needs and desires are easily met. That was my affirmation. And I practiced a specific formula, which was twice a day. I read the affirmations. All my needs and desires are easily met. All my needs and desires are easily met. all my needs and desires are easily met 3 times. Then the fourth time you say, all your needs and desires are easily met, speaking to the subconscious.
Mhm.
And it changed. I mean, I went from worried about that $20 in my pocket, which I know some people have it a lot worse than that, but I I wasn't willing to spend because I had to hold on to it. And now I have plenty. I always have plenty. Changing my perspective changed my amount of prosperity.
I love that. And I thank you for sharing that. So let us close with that as a possibility. And I'm going to be, as I always do, learning from Denise about instead of doing well, actually, it was truer for me because my birthday is New Year's Eve. So it begins a new year for me.
Right.
But a year is that's a lot. So I like that. And what did you call it? You called it a moon something?
A month. I call the months moons
Moons.
because it
Cool.
is a moon cycle from new to
Yeah.
full, from full to new. So once a
Excellent.
month, I make three. I mean, I might use the same one over and over for a whole entire year. It just that, sometimes they don't manifest exactly, or sometimes they manifest, it's an unfolding. So yeah, you get a little more, a little more, a little more. And yeah, it's been very helpful to me. I love affirmations.
Remember one of my New Year's resolutions was, and they always came from the soul. So I believe them. And one of them was to be able to behold the face of God and not turn away. And I didn't know what it meant, but I knew it's what I wanted. And the more I can be with beauty, beauty in people, beauty in nature, beauty in life, the more I become my true self. And another one was to walk steadfastly, torch ahead of me into the unknown. That was another thing. And the message of that was courage to have the belief that if I carried my light ahead of me, even if I couldn't see where I was going, and I kept at it steadfastly, that I'd make it. And now several times I've flown around the world. And as a child being raised by an agoraphobic mother, and agoraphobic means she sometimes couldn't leave the house. And I felt that at my worst time of trauma, that I was unsafe getting on an airplane, unsafe
Right.
leaving that is common for a lot of trauma survivors. We get this rut. It's not a rut. We get this cocoon and stay there. And I choose to discover, not
Explore.
just explore the world outside of me more and more, to go into that world inside of me where the buried feelings are buried alive, and to befriend them, to befriend them.
I think we're at time.
Okay, sweetheart. Well, let's say goodbye and until next week. And I'm glad people are joining us. I got word from one of my sources that 20 people had listened. So,
Right.
girl, and Rose is saying she's got all these people listening. So thank you for joining us. And
Yep.
we'll get right on how you can join us on a chat.
Right. You can join us more closely.
Yeah. And you can also
Like,
join us, as we've had people join us by video.
right.
So we will do that. But for meanwhile, God love you. And Denise, thank you so much. You've been terrific. And I will now stop our recording. Anything you want to say to wish people well?
Peace.
Peace out.